Hey, this is Rob Anspach, and welcome back to another edition of eHeroes. Hey, sometimes we make mistakes and sometimes we work for the wrong people. Well, I brought these two gentlemen on board, and normally it's a one-on-one conversation. But these guys have written a book. It's called Good Comes First, and it's all about creating that positive work culture. And so I want to introduce you guys to Mark Babbitt and Chris Edmonds, and thanks for being here. Who wants to go first?
Well, first of all, let us say thank you for having us on, and if you don't mind, a special thank you to Deborah Jason for introducing us.
Yeah, she was, I think, my second episode, and you guys are 178 or something. Yeah, it's getting there.
Wow.
Yeah, so I've been doing this for about 4 years, and the whole purpose of eHeroes was to basically interview brilliant entrepreneurs, get them to share their superpowers with my audience, and you know, sometimes I mess up. Sometimes the people I'm interviewing mess up, but that's okay. That's who we are. That's what makes us real and raw and emotional. And I think that's the problem with today's corporate world is they don't allow us as individuals to be real and raw and emotional. They expect us to be automatons and just do what we're told, and I can't do that.
Well, and again, Rob, both of us are very grateful for the opportunity to visit with you. And there's no question that our workplaces are going through a deep upheaval. We just saw that I think the total number of US workers who voluntarily left their jobs last year, 2021, was 48 million.
Mhm.
That would be a groundswell.
Yeah, yeah, and the thing is that they're being asked to come back, and they're doing so with unreasonable expectations. And not to make this all about the pandemic or the right to get a shot or not get a shot, but when someone tells me you get the jab or you have no job, you know what? I'm staying home.
Yeah, it's very interesting to have Mark and I started this book 3.5 years ago. Seems like eons. Then it was a focus on how do we help leaders basically prepare for the future of work with different generational influences
Hmm.
that when we're kind of thinking the old industrial age kind of methodology of command and control, autocratic, my way or the highway, they're just lucky you have a job. It's like, man, I don't think Gen Z is really going to embrace that.
Right.
So once the pandemic hit and there was this interesting reaction to come on back, we're not sure if you'll get infected or not, but it'll be great. Leaders really are stuck, many, with old ways of thinking, and with that's the only way, this is the only box I can do this business in. And it's those leaders that are being a bit more trusting and a bit more creative and a bit more flexible, that are finding folks really appreciate that.
Hmm.
And if you combine that with a business that's actually serving others, there's a pretty powerful retention and attraction kind of combination there.
In school, I was never a big test taker, and if you translate that over to some of the expectations that come into a real job, a lot of them are just push, 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 and that's not me. I'm more of a people person. I conversate with people and have a good time and get them to know me and trust me. Well, a test taker will panic because they have so many things to do in a short amount of time. Well, same with working for a boss, especially in the corporate realm, and it's that they always nitpick and want to know exactly what you're doing at that exact moment. That panics a lot of people.
Well, it not only panics people, but they in that moment, but they take that panic home with them,
Hmm.
and and it doesn't matter if you're a 38-year-old with 3 kids at home or somebody like me, an old white guy that just wants to be able to separate work from life. Well, we can't do that anymore. we used to call it work-life balance. Now there's almost a paywall between, since we all started working from home, there's a paywall between us and our work. And we don't feel empowered to not answer that email at 8:30 at night or 5:30 in the morning. We don't know if we should answer the text or not, because it's dinner time, but it's my boss, right? And I'm trying to impress and I'm trying to do the right thing, but it's become more than a blurred line. It's almost as if there's no line there anymore. And I just read a stat this morning: 49% of American workers are suffering from burnout. Half are clinically burnt out, and it just something's got to change, and that's why we're asking people to put good help make sure good comes first.
Well, the cell phones and the internet and the social media erased all those boundaries. So, they said, well, you're working from home. You can just answer anytime you want. No, I still have boundaries. So if you want me to be there from 9 to 4 available, that's when I'm going to be at home. I'm not going to be available 24 hours a day. But those boundaries have been blurred, and now they expect you to answer the phone at 2 a.m. and do this and do that. And I deal with a lot of companies, just helping them with the marketing, and they're always complaining about their employees. Well, you're doing the same thing to me as you do to them. You contact me at 2 a.m. It's like, no, not working.
It's interesting because part of the, let's call it, shrinking global workplace means that Mark and I have been on the phone at 2 a.m. our time with a client in the Middle East. And in one case, I was on the phone with a client who, one was in Dubai and one was in Australia. So she got up at 3 a.m. her time. So there's this very interesting dynamic of the hybrid workplace, the remote workplace means that you as a leader really cannot have old ways of thinking about 9 to 4 even.
Right.
Because 9 to 4 could be vastly different if you've got 30 people working globally. So the flexibility that's required, I think, makes sense to many leaders, but they're so fearful of not being in control, of not having their fingers on the pulse, of not having that test, right, be aced at every hour or every afternoon, right? And so there's a degree of fear, I think, that most leaders, they don't know what to do other than to go back to what was, and what was sucked.
Well, my son just lost his job. He'd go in and he was supposed to work 8 hours a day. They'd give him a sheet of things that he had to do. So he'd go through and get them all done in 4 hours. And he tells boss, "Hey, I'm done." Boss says, "Well, find something else to do." He goes, "What else? You didn't give, I need the list. Give me more work." Well, there is no more work. So he said, "Well, good. I'm going home then." Well, after the third day, he was fired.
It's an interesting perspective of, are you paying me for the expertise to do this list of things perfectly?
Right.
And if it takes me 10 freaking minutes, you don't care. Or are you paying me to be responsive for 8 hours a day? And boy, Gen Zs aren't going to play that game
Right.
at all.
Yeah. So, the title, Good Comes First, how'd that come about?
It was an accident. No, well, so when we were, and Chris has already told the story that we started this book 3.5 years ago, and we were almost done with the manuscript when COVID hit.
Mm-hmm.
And a big part of the original premise was exactly as Chris described: get ready for hybrid work, get ready for remote work, no more autocratic command and control leadership. And then the pandemic hit, and it accelerated everything we were talking about. We were saying in the next 3 to 5 years, here's where we're going to be, and then like the next day we were there. And so we frankly didn't know how to position the book, because we didn't want it to be, just like you said, you didn't want this conversation to be all about the pandemic. Well, we didn't want the book to be a pandemic book that has a shelf life, right? And so we actually worked with a brilliant man named Mark Levy, and said, look, we can't even figure out what the new title is, so we can't use the old one. And well, in the very first paragraph, we had written something about, tomorrow's exceptional leaders will put good first. We'll make sure good comes first. And he said, "Oh, that's your title. It's in your first paragraph. You didn't even know it." And so, but the whole idea is, if we treat people well, and we give them the freedom required to actually enjoy the culture, enjoy the work, build friendships at work, and more importantly to Chris and I, and now the rest of the world, is we need to show people respect at work. And once we do that, well, respect is the ultimate form of good. And people who feel respected, and MIT recently came out with a survey on this, a study on this. They said feeling respected in the workplace was 18 times more important than pay, perks, compensation, and training combined.
Mhm.
And well, how can you argue with that, right? But do we treat people with respect? I know in my tenure in the corporate world, I didn't feel respected. Rob, you shared before we started recording, you didn't feel respected. Chris, you've told stories many times about being asked to lie. Well, that's not exactly respectful, right? So it really does come down to, if we're treating people with respect, then we are putting good first.
I
And
mean,
and
it,
and
it,
the whole idea is good people doing good work at a good company to work.
right.
And
And for me, I'm very highly sarcastic. And if you've ever read any of my Rob versus books, which is my take on lousy customer service, corporate and scammers and fraudsters, I mean, these books were born during the pandemic. From 2019 to 2022, I've written 5 of these Rob versus books, with another 2 more coming out at the end of the year. And I just found that most corporate America, their customer service went in the toilet. And then when they try to patronize you with, oh, we're putting all of our stuff overseas for other people to answer, and I'm like, my God, just shoot me now. I mean, it was horrible. So it's, you know, but my stance is, I'm trying to make people laugh with these stories because they're relatable.
Yeah.
But you are trying to get into the deep dive and change the corporate, from the inside out, and that's what we need. I mean, I love writing my sarcastic books, but they didn't need to come out if corporations actually understood what people really wanted, and not necessarily a cheap price, not necessarily the best quality. They just wanted you to be recognized as a customer.
Well, and almost as a human.
Yeah.
Imagine that. One of the pieces that we really found we felt was powerful, and that people have reacted to it, and Mark's described it. It's the idea that most leaders have never been asked to change their work culture. They barely know how to observe it, monitor it, and understand where gaps are. So there's an education that we go through in the book to kind of say, I know you've never been asked to do this. I know you see your job as getting crap out the door. But what we want you to do is realize that if you are able to create an environment where people feel respected and validated for their ideas, efforts, and contributions every day, you will never have a retention problem. You will never have an attraction problem. You'll have customers dying to get into your system. But more important is, you're going to have money. You're going to do better sales. You're going to have better results. You're going to have people committed to reducing dumb expenses so that the company can thrive. And if you're the only one thinking that way, it's never going to work. But if you have 100 people thinking that way, now you've got a beast that is pretty fun to be involved in. So the idea of respect is as important as results. It's not common. And so we knew we had to help leaders realize that, okay, so results are important, and you know how to set performance targets and then hold people accountable some of the time, slash maybe half the time.
Right.
But if you create respect targets and you coach to that, model that, mentor that, measure that, the results happen with less drama, with less waste. It's pretty fascinating.
I read a study that over the last few years, a lot of the college kids, leaving college to get into their first jobs would leave within the first 2 or 3 years disgruntled with corporate America, and they'd basically be turned into crybabies because they didn't know how to deal with that type of environment. Where their manager was beating them down and devaluing them as a human being, and college tried to build them up and motivate them. And we have to start at the college level and then go into the corporate level with the same type of evenness, so people don't feel disgruntled right away.
It's funny you say that because one of the reasons I personally got into the culture and leadership space is because I was involved in the career space for some time.
Yeah.
And specifically, one of my companies helps recent graduates, young professionals, current college students prepare for and enter the workforce.
Mm-hmm.
And we thought we were helping people find their dream jobs when we first launched this campaign. And it turned out people writing us going, I did all this work for this. I'm just going to go work for myself. This sucks. Well, those same people, you use the phrase crybaby, at very least they were labeled as job hoppers and malcontents and selfish. No, they're not selfish. They just know what they want. And this crap right here, this isn't it.
Yeah.
And we're still in that groove today. We're still, think about so many of these employers now that the pandemic is finally starting to loosen up, at least for now in this moment that we're recording. They're saying, forget all about the fact that we let you work from home and we gave you all that freedom and all that autonomy, and you got to decide maybe for the first time in your professional careers when, where, and how work got done. Forget all of that. Forget how happy you were. Get your butts back in the office. And 48 million people, as Chris has already said, last year went, hell no, I'm not doing this. Right. And they're not, sometimes they're leaving without even a plan B or C or D. They're just leaving.
Yeah.
They're just saying, no, I'm not doing this. And I'm not doing it effective right now.
Yeah. The ride hail services got their biggest influx of employees because of this pandemic. People were so fed up with corporate, they went to work for Uber Eats and DoorDash and became a taxi service. And to me, that's kind of, I don't know, if you're going to do that, create your own business.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it's interesting because there are opportunities, and certainly the growing economy means that there's jobs open. However, how many jobs are really being opened by leaders that genuinely care for their employees, right? And if I'm rolling the dice and I go and work for a company, I just saw this on LinkedIn with an experience with someone who had just joined a corporate job, young woman, master's degree, very, very talented, ready to go, did the 2-day onboarding thing. At the end of the second day, all the C-suite came down and she was introducing herself to the other leaders, CFO, CEO, on and on and on. Mm-hmm. Reached out to shake the hand of the CEO, and the CEO pulled his hand back and laughed to himself, turned around and walked away. And she thought, that's not normal. That's not helpful. Turn to the person that had onboarded her with another 10, 12 people and said, is this a COVID thing? She said, no, it's a power move for him. And she thought, I cannot stay here. And this was the first 2 days. So again, we have leaders who are desperately holding on to the old, and it didn't even work 20 years ago. It certainly doesn't work today.
No, my dad worked for a company for 40 some years, and I think he's one of the last of the titans, the people that stayed forever at a job. Now the average is like 2 or 3 years, and you go to the next job, the next job, the next job. And to me, I was like, that's exhausting. I couldn't do it.
Yeah.
Well, we several years ago, we put out a stat at U-Turn, the company that helps with young careerists, And we put out a stat that said, based on current data, this is, I don't know, probably 5 years ago now, that the average millennial and Gen Z would have 8 different careers, not 8 different jobs, 8 different careers and up to 30 different jobs, taking into effect, accelerating retirement ages and all that. Can you imagine having to job search 25, 30 times in your career? Not because necessarily because you want to advance, or maybe you made the occasional mistake, but just in the pursuit of happiness at work, right? 30 job searches over the course of your career. That is insane. And if that doesn't tell you how badly company cultures suck right now, I don't know what does.
Yeah. My daughter hasn't been working for a long time because she just got a double organ transplant. And she's been waiting for that for many, many years. But now she's getting back into the workforce. And she must have put out 40, 50 resumes. And she got one job offer. It was just, it's disheartening because these companies are hiring, but their turnover, their churn rate is so awful. And she looked and she said, why are you hiring for this position? And they basically said, because we can't keep anybody. And she's like, nope, red flag, not even.
There's a gap here somewhere. Well, and again, what's interesting is that there is literally in companies like that, they've already figured out the numbers.
Yeah.
That if they churn 75% in the first year, they're still doing okay because either the phone's getting answered or the emails are being responded to. But that's very, very different than creating a relationship with a smart person of any size, gender, race, etc., that feels like what they're doing is meaningful and important. It actually serves the community. Too obvious. They have fun. They solve interesting problems. I mean, yes, if you're thinking about your current job and those things aren't there, then you're probably compensating in a number of ways. And wouldn't it be great if more leaders realize that that's their job, is to create an environment where people feel valued and doing good work?
Right. Because if I'm HR, I don't want to have to constantly be hiring people. I want my leaders to make sure that the people that are staying there aren't going to leave. Yeah.
We just had a call this morning without telling you much of the detail, but a division head just got replaced. And this guy, I think, has been in place for maybe 6 months, Mark, if I've got that right. And so we were speaking to someone running admin services, interior, everything from accounts receivable, payable, benefits, payroll, all that stuff. So her entire customer base is internal folks, some external, but mostly internal folks. And I said, so how's the new guy working out, right? Because there's a new leader of, a third of the company coming in, and it's like he came in and he said, I know nothing about what's happened in the past. I know something about how, I and other jobs have experienced admin services. What do you need from me? How can I be helpful? How can we work together? And she said, it's been almost unbelievable. Like, is someone filming this for some joke show? Because the previous two regimes had been so difficult. So a person coming in with an attitude of teamwork and service makes a huge difference in a matter of days.
So
Rob, what you described, that HR having to hire over and over again, most people in HR don't even know that's a problem. That's just the way life is, right? And by the way, it is HR to which the CEO, they'll go to HR and go, our company culture isn't very good, fix it. Right? And fix it right now. Well, HR can't fix culture. Culture, as we say in Good Comes First over and over again, is a top-down issue. Leaders dictate culture, not HR, right? And yes, some teams, some departments, some divisions might have a more acceptable subculture than the company has a culture. But that too is a leadership problem.
Mhm.
If this group over here is, if everybody there's staying 7.2 years, but over here they're leaving in the national average of 2.3, well, what are they doing over there? How are they keeping people? How are they attracting top talent? How are they being more productive? Well, leaders aren't asking that question, so neither is HR.
Mhm.
So we just keep hiring people. Well, that's like continuing to take cold medicine without actually trying to get better,
Right.
right? It makes no sense. But that's what corporate America has come to today, right now.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I know that, you've already said, you're promoting the book, you're getting on other podcasts, you're interviewing, you're being interviewed by lots of great people. And that's awesome. But what's that one resounding message that basically you put out there to get people to say, hey, you know what, you need this book.
Let me answer that one first. I think the value proposition, if we can use corporate speak, is that this not only is doable, but it has tremendous benefits, tremendous benefits. Not only to the leaders themselves, there's less drama, there's less stress, there's more giggling, right? There's better productivity, there's better results, but that until a leader comes to the decision that this culture is not working well for most, and it's something I have to fix, then we've got the tools. We have the step by step. Literally, this is the journey that you take. Do this first, do this second, do this third. And what we help leaders do is change the nature of relationships across the business. And if they're willing to do that, and if they're willing to set aside some of these antiquated, lousy, demeaning practices, then you're going to have a subculture that's going to be pretty darn attractive. You're going to have a company that's going to make money. You're going to have way more fun. You're going to have people lined up out the door to join your division, your team. That's a way better kind of experience as a human for that leader, much less for those that are working with them. So I think the key message is it can be better, and you're going to have to be proactive. You're going to have to champion this. You're going to have to be a role model of this. And it's not going to be a program that 2 days worth of teaching and everything is all great. It's 12 to 18 months worth of work, but you're going to be there anyway. so,
Mhm.
so let's do the right thing. Mark, what have I missed?
Well, I'll just throw out the subtitle of Good Comes First is how today's leaders create an uncompromising culture that doesn't suck. And it really comes down to that. And this is what most leaders don't understand. And Rob, you said earlier you were a top salesperson. Well, not to pick on salespersons, but they sometimes, in a lot of company cultures, they get a free ride. They get a free ticket.
Mhm.
And that if you're a top salesperson and you're bringing in those dollars, you can treat women disrespectfully. You can bully your coworkers. You can be arrogant at work. You can literally turn people away that just say, "Look, if I have to work with this guy, I'm not going to be here anymore." But people tolerate that because he's a top performer, right? And this is where compromising comes in. You can find, and the book makes it very clear, you can find high values match and high performers, and the person has to be both to work here at this company. I will not, as a leader, compromise my company culture just to achieve higher dollar numbers or drive better revenue or have better sales. I'm going to equally value respect and results. And you can be the best salesperson in the world, but if you're a jerk, you don't work here. And that's my message. And that's how we create great cultures.
Mhm. That's great. So, how do people find the book? Where do they go?
Well, not surprisingly, we have a website that's goodfirst.com. Of course, it's at all your favorite booksellers. And when the book released in late September last year, Mark found it first in an actual brick and mortar Barnes and Noble store. And I said, I must find the local Barnes and Noble. I hadn't even looked. right? And I'm a book fan, so of course I went over too. So it's available in actual bookstores. But
including airports, which is kind of fun.
we're so pleased that this thing has taken on um, a bit of a life of its own. And
Mhm.
it's, as authors, we're always pushing our current book and our current thinking. And this book has really taken hold. And so we're seeing a lot of leaders using the Audible book.
Mhm.
The I can listen to it audio while I'm driving, kind of a thing. So there's some there's some really cool benefits from diving into this, and there's takeaways that are very tactical and very practical. And yes, you can make some changes pretty quickly, but it'll probably be a bit of a longer term commitment overall. So goodcomesfirst.com.
So, all the listeners that are out there, it is a big green book with brilliant white letters. It says "Good comes first." And so, this is what makes Mark and Chris an e-hero, and they're just out to educate everybody about, just having a positive work culture. So, grab their book, and I'll see you guys on the next episode. Adios.